Hey, what's going on, creative? So it's the end of the year and it's time to do a review. And my review is kind of like looking at all of the tools that I've worked with this year and where do they land in my workflow? Because one thing that we do know, we have a lot of tools coming at us and we have the same amount of time in the day. So Claude is an ecosystem. And Claude with his projects and is really good with coding, is really good with evaluating code. And that's where I use it the most. Obviously, OpenAI with the API, Canvas, now projects, the O1 model, Gemini. Gemini was one of those where I'm putting it as a sandbox, and I'm going to define sandbox as this. The sandbox are tools that get evaluated. Okay, so I will use Gemini, and I've been using it for the API because of that 2 million token context window is where I've been using Gemini. But as a sandbox tool, it now qualifies to get my time. Before it didn't. It was in the Horizon, which are tools that I don't put a lot of time in. But it has moved up to Sandbox where I'm giving it the time. And of course, the Notebook LLM is another one that kind of kicked it up a notch for me. And then Ollama. Ollama, I'm going to say we're going to put that in the Horizon. And I'm putting it there because I think when you're doing the type of projects I work on at times, I think a open source model is something I should have in my back pocket, and I should know how to use an open source model. So that's the reason it's there, but it's one of those where I'm not going to put a whole lot of time into it, but every once in a while I'm going to go to it to see what can I do with it via an API or putting it in different projects. Okay, so those are my LLMs, and I know there's so many more out there, but again, I have time more than I have time to evaluate tools. I just don't have the time to do it. So I'm sticking with these 4. All right, I want to go to the coding tools because the coding tools are probably the ones that are really interesting, especially at the end of the year. I'm going to put Bolt on the horizon. And the reason I'm putting Bolt on the horizon is because their free tier kind of annoyed me a little bit, is that you get 5 prompts essentially, and then they rate limit you. But there are so many errors that came up on a simple code request that I would have need more than 5 prompts to get there, to get it right. And with only 5, that kind of annoyed me. So I'm going to be watching it because I know everyone is talking about Bolt. Lovable is another one. However, I'm putting Lovable in the sandbox because the same prompt I gave Bolt, I gave to Lovable. I was able to get the code I wanted out of Lovable. I wasn't able to get it out of Bolt. And that right there says, okay, let me put some time into this. And I really want to put some time into this category of tools because you're going to be talking about every year, all of these AI agents and coding with AI. I think I just need to have some time with it. But that is where Cursor and Windsurf. Cursor, as you can see, goes into Horizon. Windsurf, I think, is a great tool if you're not a programmer. And because I'm not a programmer, Windsurf worked better. However, Windsurf has a lot of flaws in it. And I'm going to do a comparison and what I did with these 4 tools. And I put them up against basically Claude and OpenAI. And I just thought that these did not live up to working with Claude in AI. So with that, VS Code ecosystem. I can do far more with OpenAI, Claude, and VS Code than I can with Windsurf and Lovable. I can get further faster with it. So VS Code is still a part of the ecosystem, right? Now, on the flip side of the coding, when we're creating code and backend code, LangFlow and DataStax are two specialized tools that I will go to. And by specialized tools, they are really, when I say specialized tool, it is specialized. They have a single use case. LangFlow and DataStax is for back-end programming when I'm working with a large language model. That's what it does. So LangFlow basically handles all of the back-end logic, while DataStax handles the embeddings of the large language model. So all the training data, DataStax is handling that. The large LangFlow is handling the logic flow. Okay, so very specific use case. Now, AI video. When I started this year, I thought it was Horizon. All of them were Horizon. I didn't particularly like them. But now I'm going to say that Kling, Minimax, Sora, let's go with Runway as well. These go to the sandbox. I think they hold merit, and I think AI video is something that is going to grow in 2025, and I just want to be better at it. But that leaves Pika Labs. Pika Labs, I've never liked it. It's sunset. I'm done with Pika Labs. I'm not going to use it, and I'm not going to put any time into it because I have these four. Now, Luma Dream Machine, that one gets the Horizon because I've seen what they're doing, and I don't think you can overlook where they're going with their model. Now, that brings me to LTX Studio. LTX Studio, I like the concept of what they're doing. I'm not a fan of the workflow of it. So, and the results. So I'm going to put LTX Studio on the back burner for this year, but I think it's one of those where I think it has an opportunity to come back. Now, in line with the AI video, let's talk about AI avatars, because for marketing, sales, and for learning, the AI avatar is a huge thing, especially when you talk about, but I'm going to put them still on the horizon. And the reason I'm doing that, they've gotten so much better, but I need them to get better. Just this past week, I saw a few people use them. And although the hands move and you get movement with the talking, the movement of the body seems unnatural. It's like there's a lot of movement. It seems unnatural. They haven't gone far enough across that uncanny valley for me to actually use them, but I think they're interesting. Now, the one thing I am going to sunset is DID. I think it's a cool tool, but I don't think they're as far as HeyGen or Synthesia, and I think that's a problem. So I think for that one, I'm going to just, kind of not pay attention to it. Okay. All right. Now that leaves us with a couple of categories here, and let's go ahead and pick some that kind of don't fall into one neat category here. Grammarly, that is, let's say that's a toolbox. If I'm writing something before I post it, I go to Grammarly to make sure it is good. Zapier, I think Zapier I'm going to sunset. I think the cost of Zapier is a problem. Zapier is one of those no-code automation tools, kind of like Make. So Zapier and Make are in the same category. However, Make is going to the sandbox. And the only reason is because I think I do need to spend a little time learning this tool. Although I'm convinced that JavaScript and Python can do what Make can do, and I can do it easier than I can trying to figure out what component to stack up inside of this no code tool. But I do think it's worthy of learning, because I've seen a couple of things where it says, oh yeah, that would have been easier than if I would have just tried to code it. Okay, Novel Crafter. Novel Crafter goes to the toolbox. Now, in the toolbox, again, are these tools that they are simply fundamental tools that I use when I need something, sometimes specific and sometimes general. But in the case of an ecosystem, it's not a fundamental tool, but man, it is an important tool. And Novel Crafter, if you're a nonfiction writer, you should be using Novel Crafter. If you do any type of writing, you should use Grammarly. 11 Labs, I think, is going to fall into the ecosystem. And 11 Labs is falling into the ecosystem simply because it is the best text to voice to voice. It is just the best tool out there. It has voice changer. It has projects for large sets of text. It has text to speech. It has, I think, the studio that they have now where you can almost create a podcast, special effects, hundreds of voices, whether it is a voice someone has kind of remixed or you have real actors now putting their voices up there. 11 Labs is just fundamentally the best tool. If you're doing anything with audio, you're using 11 Labs. And I know real-time API with OpenAI, their voices are really good, but I think 11 Labs is just, I think it's just, you just need to use that. Hugging Face. So Hugging Face is going to specialize. Hugging Face is, if you want to interact with the model, you go to Hugging Face. If you, the new models that are out there, it allows you to kind of like get a sense of what's out there and actually use the models. So Hugging Face is one of those where I think you just should be using Hugging Face to at least keep up with everything that's going on. And finally, Replicate. Replicate is my tool when I'm using the API. And I think it's just the greatest tool because what Replicate allows me to do is to avoid the subscriptions. Because if you look at all of these tools, you can see here that AI is going to become the next streaming subscription issue. You know for a fact that you have a lot of subscriptions for streaming. I think AI, all of these different tools could get you into the same position where you have just a lot of subscriptions. Well, the API allows you to avoid that because you only pay for what you use. And that's where Replicate comes in. Streamlit, Streamlit, I'm going to sunset. I think it's for app building, but I played around with it. It was nice. It's okay. Don't need it. Not going to use it. So I'm going to sunset that one. All right. And then finally with Canva goes to the toolbox. Although I typically like to work with Photoshop and Illustrator, sometimes having Canva, I have found it is really a nice tool to have for some really simple, quick work. That leaves us with the images. And I know there are more image models out there. These are the ones I use. So let's go Midjourney ecosystem. And it's there because I just use the damn thing. All the time. Flux is a toolbox because Replicate and Flux go hand to hand as far as I'm concerned. That's really how I use it. Firefly, I'm going to call this specialized. Specialized because I'm only using Adobe Firefly inside of Photoshop and inside of Premiere with the generative extend. I'm not going to Firefly to generate images. And so that becomes a specialty tool for me. Ideogram. I can't say Ideogram is a sandbox, So I'm going to call it a specialized tool because it's mainly because I use it for very specific images. I'm not using it for everything. I'm using it for very specific images, primarily images with text. And this is where Recraft come in at. So Recraft does text very well. I just haven't played with it enough. So I'm working with Recraft because I think Recraft and Ideogram are on par when it comes to text inside of generating text. But Ideogram, I still use that more than Recraft. Recraft, I'm really just trying to get an understanding of it and what it can do. But Recraft has an API, so that may boost it up at some point. Leonardo AI, I'm going to sunset Leonardo AI, and I'm going to sunset all things Stability AI. And the reason is not that I don't like these tools. It's just simply that the level of complexity versus the quality that I'm getting versus spending time with all of the other tools, they just don't rise to that level with me. And so that's what happens with those two. It's not that they're bad. I know a lot of people swear by them. A lot of people use Stability AI and use Leonardo. But for me, I'm just going to sunset them. If you kind of lay it out on how I allocate my time to these tools, you'll see that it kind of opens itself up to being able to really learn these different tools. Because one, if we talk about the sunset tools, they will get no time from me at all in 2025. If they peak back up at some point, then I will relook at them, but otherwise they get no time from me. The Horizon tools, very little time. It is going to be, I heard there was an update to one of these tools. So Bolt had an update. I'll go take a look at it. But it's going to be very strict as to how one of these leave one of these areas, because when you look at the number of tools in the sandbox, well, I generally will give 2 hours a month to tools in the sandbox, or I'm going to find projects where I think they may fit. And if you think about that, if any of these end up coming back into a sandbox, then something's going to have to give. The specialized tools, again, these tools, they're not part of my time. They are very specific to a use case, and so they don't get a lot of time because I know how to use them. I know what I need them for. I grab them when I need them. And the toolbox is the same way. I'm not using Novel Crafter every day. I just know Novel Crafter is when I get ready to write, I'm going to write. When I get ready to do a project with Replicate and Flux, it takes me no time to do it. The time really is with the sandbox. That's where the time is spent trying to understand what they can do, where you can use it, what projects they work for. Is finding projects to really justify the sandbox is where you spend most of the time. So this kind of lays it out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and save this. My 2025 review, Final Cut. I'm going to save that. So at some point later in the year, I can come in and I can just come here to load, Final Cut, and see what we have, and then do a comparison. All right. You guys keep creating.